I want to give you guys an in-depth look of how the hell I'm able to talk on a ventilator. It's really quite simple, but it does take practice and you have to gain muscle memory to be able to do it consistently. So let's get to it. First things first, I want to show you guys what your trachea looks like. The trachea itself is the actual pathway that we breathe in. And the trach, what we short call the trach, is really a tracheostomy tube that goes into our throat. That's what you can see in my throat. It goes in there and then it fills up the trachea and it blows air into my trachea, and then that's how I'm able to inhale and exhale. And you can see here in this diagram, at the end of the tracheostomy tube is a cuff. And you might be thinking, well, you might be thinking, what the hell is a cuff? Well, the cuff is basically just a balloon that fills up the airway or the passageway for the trachea and keeps all the air down into your lung and makes sure the air doesn't come out of your mouth or your nose. And you can see above the trach is the vocal folds. So that's why many people on trachs aren't able to talk, because the air isn't allowed to come up because of that cuff. And if the air can't hit the vocal cords, then you can't talk. So here's basically a representation of a cuffed and uncuffed trach. Those are the two phrases most commonly used. And I have an uncuffed trach. And doing so was actually a bit of a process. So here's another example of what that looks like. You basically have air in a balloon filled at the end of the trach. And for me, I was able to practice while I was in the hospital. I had to prove to them that I could keep my O2, my oxygen saturation up, and in the 90s while also getting rid of the cuff. Because me personally, I hated having a cuff because it hurt so much going in and out. We would change my trach once a week when I was in the hospital so that my parents could get practice. They both had to change my trach 3 times before they would allow me to come home. And doing so once a week, I hated it. It hurt. It felt like a knife going through my throat, especially with that cuff on there. Even they have to deflate the balloon before they change it, but it still just hurt because you have all that material, all that plastic, even when the balloon is deflated. I hated having the cuff on there. So I kept trying to argue, okay, how do I get off the cuff trach? And they basically said, we're going to lower the amount of air that's in the balloon gradually, and we need you to show us that you can keep your oxygen saturation up. So how I was able to do that was basically, it's similar to when you go swimming, how you hold your breath and it holds the air in your lungs while you're underwater. That's exactly what I do every day, all day. And that's how I'm able to breathe and hold the air within my lungs. And then when I go to relax my tongue and relax my throat, that's how I'm able to talk. That's how the air is able to come up around the trach and hit my vocal cords and talk. So, and when I don't, so here's kind of what it sounds like. It sounds really freaky. I'm almost like Darth Vader. But if I were to relax my tongue, my nose, and my throat and just let the air flow, here's what it sounds like. And what happens is if I do that long enough, the air isn't staying in my lungs, and my O2 or my oxygen saturation will actually start to go down. It'll go down into like 80s, 70s, 60s. And that's when you start to get close to passing out. And it can be kind of dangerous. So you really have to build up that muscle memory of being able to hold your tongue basically at the roof of your mouth every day, all day. And it gets easier over time. I was able to do it pretty quickly in the hospital. And that's how I was able to go off of a cuffed trach and have an uncuffed trach. So just to summarize, I want to show you guys a trach again. Here is all the components. You have the cuff down at the bottom, usually filled with about 10 cc's of air. And if you want to get technical with it, you can start to wean off, or not really wean off, but you can gradually decline how much air you put in there and go from 10 cc's to 9 to 8 to 7 to 6. And once you get down to 0, then you can go cuffless. And then you have the trach tube going into your trachea, and then that front plate there is called the phalange. And then you also have an inner cannula tubing inside the actual tubing of the trach in case there's ever a mucus plug that forms inside there. You can just take the entire inner cannula out, and technically you're supposed to change it about once a day. I change it all the time whenever I'm doing cough assist, which you can see in other videos. I have a cough assist video. When I'm doing cough assist, if the mucus won't come through, if I can feel it's dry or sticky in there, I'll just change the inner cannula. And then finally is that tubing sticking out, and that's just how you stick a syringe and fill up the balloon. So yeah, that is how I talk with my trach. And similar to that, it's also, I had another process of how I was able to eat and drink and pass what's called the swallow test after my injury. So check that video out. Make sure you like and subscribe, and stay strong, stay positive, and remember to always hold on to hope, because hope is the lighthouse that'll guide you through the storm. So yeah, thank you guys. Peace.